All right, so welcome everyone to the March 2025 RCP webinar, Circadian Health and the RCP. We actually had a good amount of feedback come in for requests for us to cover this topic. And with the recent time change that many of us have just gone through, and I know we have some friends in the UK who are about to go through a time change, we figured now would be a perfect time to discuss this. So, yeah, without unmuting yourself, maybe just something to ponder. If you did just go through a time change, how has that left you feeling? Is that something that typically impacts you? Do you do okay with it? If it does impact you, is it your sleep? Is it your energy? These are all very, very common issues that people go through around this time of year. So we're going to dive in a little bit deeper as far as what you can do to get your circadian rhythm a little bit back on track, and what you can control. Because if you did just go through a time change, of course, that's out of your control. Unless you're lucky enough to live in an area that does not participate. There's only so much you can do, but we're going to walk you through some steps that we think can be very helpful to get your circadian rhythm back on track, which has an impact on digestion, sleep, of course, hormones. How you manage your stress has a big impact here. So we're gonna talk about these things today. So we are also going to talk about the organizing paradigm, as we typically do. Of course, the circadian rhythm. We're going to discuss the connection between a healthy circadian rhythm and sleep, hormones, mood, our overall outlook, the consequences of excess artificial lighting, the benefits of natural light, especially in the morning, the copper connection, and we have references, resources, and more to help get you on your way. With that, we got Morley Robbins here today. Morley, I'll kick it over to you. Let you introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. Delighted to be here and looking forward to our discussion. Again, I've got a bunch of adult children and a bunch of grandchildren. And the challenge is that I think my grandchildren know more about copper metabolism than the average physician. But that's okay. We're going to keep chipping away at it. I think of myself as an educator. I really enjoy the opportunity to dance on minds. And I spent the last 15 years teaching myself about minerals. And we had an opportunity to meet a recognized cell physiologist from BYU yesterday, Brigham Young. And he was excited that I knew minerals. He said, well, I don't, that's your job. I just focus on the cell. I'm like, wow, how do you distinguish? So, but it was really fun to spend some time chatting with him. I've always been a change agent from day one of my career, so that's been just a theme of my passion is to help bring in new change, and new ideas, and get a sense of where the puck is going to be. And so, I like to think of myself as I guess in my dreams, I'm RFK Jr. That would be such a great position to be in. Um, and what's interesting, we're here in Salt Lake City, and we met several people who are very good friends of Bobby Kennedy. So I made a pretty good impression on a couple of them. So who knows? Maybe we will have that conversation that I would love to have with him. And delighted to be a part of that. And I think for those of you who follow my work, you know how much excitement and joy I get in separating fact from fiction, because I think there's so much confusion about it, but particularly as it relates to history, nutrition, and medicine. And my theme, of course, is we have been misled and misfed. And each of these webinar seminars, has a chance to delve into that whole dynamic. So delighted to be here. Look forward to our uh, chance to share what we know with you today. Will, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Morley. So my name is Will Evans. Always an honor to be here. I'm a graduate of the RCP Institute. That was Group 14. I now work alongside Morley and a great team that we have here at the RCP, where our mission is really just to spread the word, spread the word in this message of health, which is really based on Mother Nature. I'm a dad to a RCP toddler, and I really love all things related to health, fitness. I just really enjoy learning, just learning and helping others feel better. And the quote that I have up here is actually from my wife, Rachel Evans. I stole it from her. And that is become the CEO of your own health, which really comes back to taking charge and taking responsibility for your own health, um, being an advocate for your own health, and really just taking matters into your own hands as much as you can, of course, within reason here. But take your health seriously because once it's gone, oftentimes it's really hard to get it back. So here we have the organizing paradigm of the RCP. Morley, you want to tackle this one, or would you like me to?
Sure. All right, it's up to you. Go ahead, Will.
Okay. So basically, the premise here is that iron carries oxygen. So a lot of people are very familiar with iron. Most today are told that they need more iron, but really it's copper that actually harnesses oxygen and optimizes the energy production and enables the exhaust removal here. When copper and iron become dysregulated, which they so often are, oxygen can no longer be metabolized properly and is the very origin of oxidative stress. And so really neurotransmitters, catecholamines, glucocorticoids, steroid hormones, these are all messengers that are responding to rising oxidative stress. And rising and unchecked oxidative stress will cause enzymes in the body to stop working, which then equals symptoms.
So, Will, before you leave that slide, I came across a very important article that was written by Earl Frieden, who was a famous metal biologist at the Florida State University for 1950s to 1990s for about 40 years. And in 1971, he wrote a very important article about ceruloplasmin being the bridge between copper and iron. And I know I read the article at least one other time, but for some reason, this one passage had never registered until this past week. And in a study that they did, they discovered, it's really speaking to this whole organizing paradigm. They discovered that 1 week before the lab animals were deemed anemic, one entire week before that designation was established, that the ferroxidase enzyme function of ceruloplasmin, which is a really big deal inside our body, but we're not allowed to measure it for whatever reason. But what they discovered is that the ferroxidase enzyme function was at 0 1 week before these animals were deemed anemic. And it's staggering to think about how important that marker is, how revealing it is, and yet we're not allowed to measure it.
So this ferroxidase enzyme that Morley is speaking of, that's just one of many enzymes that ceruloplasmin carries out. And so if you're new today, if you're new to the community, ceruloplasmin is something that we really place supreme focus on here in the RCP. Sometimes it can also be referred to as bioactive copper, but basically it's a very key protein in the body that contains copper, or it should contain copper. But there's a lot of environmental factors these days that can really denature this protein, cause the copper to leak out, which can then give the illusion of copper toxicity, which is something that we often talk about here. So this is a really key protein in the body that everything here in the protocol is aimed to boost and protect. And so really, the RCP is designed to optimize optimal energy production, optimal ATP with minimal exhaust, i.e. lower oxidative stress. So really, when we're talking about stress, could be physical stress, could be mental stress, emotional stress. All this stress becomes oxidative stress. And so our focus here is to really remineralize the body, de-stress the body as much as we can to reduce this oxidative stress. And so again, if you're newer to the community, whatever ailment you're struggling with, whatever label you've maybe been given, search that along with oxidative stress and see what you find. And this also applies to more or less the topic that we're going to be talking about a good amount today, which is sleep and sleep disturbances and the connection with the circadian rhythm. Something that I think a lot of people might be struggling with a little bit extra right now with the time change. Um, if you know, and the sleep deprivation, which has a connection to oxidative stress. If you're dealing with sleep deprivation, that's going to further increase stress, oxidative stress, and put you in this vicious cycle.
Mhm.
Okay, so what is the circadian rhythm? It is the natural cycle of physical, mental, and behavior changes that the body goes through in a 24-hour period. The circadian rhythm is greatly affected by light, which we'll talk quite a bit about, and it has a major impact on our sleep and is controlled by actually a very small area in the brain, in the middle of the brain, known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. And this really acts as the master clock of the body. It regulates the circadian rhythm. There's a copper connection here, which Morley's going to talk about after just a little bit. And this suprachiasmatic nucleus is actually located in the hypothalamus.
Right. One of the 64 chambers of the hypothalamus.
Yeah. And I know, Morley, I've heard you mention before that the hypothalamus really loves magnesium and copper. So just one more example of these two minerals that we put so much
Right.
emphasis on, extra emphasis on with our protocol.
Well, it's really straightforward because the hypothalamus is a very energy demanding part of our brain. Well, you can't make energy without magnesium and copper. It's so central to the physiology of our body, but also the brain, but especially this regulatory area of the brain. So we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so the next slide. Is that I Love Lucy?
Yeah, absolutely. Lucy and Ethel at the chocolate factory. It's like, have you seen it? If you all haven't seen it, it's one of the most entertaining 2 or 3 minutes of comedy you'll ever experience.
I have vague memories of staying home sick from school as a kid and that
Right.
the reruns being on daytime TV. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'll let you. Do you want to tackle this slide, Morley?
sure. Yeah. There's again, as Will has mentioned, stress has a magical ability to really throw us off. But there are a lot of disruptions to our circadian rhythm. Obviously, like things like shift work. I remember my oldest sister was a pediatric nurse, and initially she had to work the night shift, which is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. She was never right while she was working the night shift, just because she could never find her mojo. And a lot of people find themselves in shift work in that distressed state. It's really, really very demanding. And this is something that I've experienced. I did a lot of travel for 20 years. I was always doing domestic travel. Very rarely that when I do international, I only did maybe 5 or 6 trips overseas. But uh, as I think anyone who's experienced it, you know how physically draining that is. Um, Obviously, the light exposure, it's just, as Will pointed out just before we all got together, the lighting in this library is frightening. It's LED heaven or hell, whichever you want it. And of course, I think we're all going through this transition now with sleep deprivation. It's funny, the um, the seasons, the change in the clock, that never really bothered me much, but I know it really throws some people for a loop. So we just have to be really respectful of that. But what that can impact, obviously, is a lot of our chemistry, the hormones. Again, I take a different stance on hormones. A lot of people want to think that the hormones run the body. I think what the hormones do is they react to oxidative stress and they respond to the change in the body's environment. But they're very powerful. I'm not denying that. I just don't think they run the body per se. They really regulate activity, which is really significant. Obviously, mood is affected. Uh, and obviously, the gut microbiome is very heavily influenced by stress. Blood pressure can be essentially affected. And then, of course, just our whole sense of self and body temperature. So, again, I just would encourage people to watch that little film clip with Lucy and Ethel, because the manager walking in saying, "Speed it up, boys," that's the stress in your life coming to a head. So, it's just a very entertaining way to think about it.
Yeah. So really some pretty small changes in your routine can have a big impact on your circadian rhythm, either for the good or for the bad. And look at the impact that daylight savings can have as an example. So acute increases in the rates of strokes, heart attacks, increased inflammatory markers in response to stress, mood disturbances, digestive disturbances, sleep disturbances, of course, actually an increased rate of fatal automobile accidents. And according to some sources, there's actually a surge in alcohol abuse around this time. And it lasts, according to some sources, about a week following the transition in time. And I think a lot of that is just people just kind of how Morley alluded to, the mood is off, their sleep is off, and they're just looking to de-stress, maybe self-medicate for some sleep. I know a lot of people this time of year also turn to melatonin supplements to just try and get back on track, get some sleep. Anything else you want to add here, Morley?
Yeah, well, in its broadest sense, our whole model is to optimize the activation of oxygen to become water so we can release energy. That's what the RCP is really all about. And anytime you have stress in your world, you're going to have oxidative stress in your body. And think of oxidative stress as an opportunity cost. There's always, like when we're driving our car, we're always giving off exhaust. And that's true in our mitochondria. There's always exhaust being given off because it's just the nature of that physiology. But it's when we're driving a car and it becomes billowing black smoke. Well, that's a different situation. Well, that's what oxidative stress is. It's exceeding the norm of that signaling process. And when it begins to build and the seesaw gets way out of whack, then it becomes very disruptive. And that filter of the balance of our physiology, that's what triggers the hormones. That's what triggers the regulatory pathways to kick in. So it just is recognizing that here with our circadian rhythm being thrown off because of daylight savings, that's now become our environmental stressor that's affecting the oxidative stress inside our body.
And here is one of many articles that you can find on this subject. If you do a search, you'll find a lot of articles from various newspapers, websites that all kind of highlight the same thing, but they're highlighting that health issues do pop up when the clocks change. So as we mentioned before, heart attack rates, rates of stroke increases, mood disturbances, hospital admissions, inflammatory markers, traffic accidents. I mean, it really is kind of surprising, but they really have made a connection here. And like I said earlier, most of these sites all do say that these increases tend to last for about a week until after the change has set in and people have acclimated or somewhat acclimated. So not all sleep is the same. We should go through again, of course this will depend on how much sleep you get, but on average we should go through 4 to 5 90-minute sleep cycles a night. We move from lighter sleep cycles such as REM sleep into deeper sleep cycles, which is known as delta or slow wave sleep, which according to most sleep experts, that's where we really get our most restorative benefits from sleep. And if your circadian rhythm is off, your sleep cycles will be off. So, each cycle is important. Each cycle offers unique restorative benefits to the body, to the brain. But if you're jacked up on cortisol, if you're jacked up on adrenaline, and you're not managing your stress, your sleep cycles will be off. If you're taking things like caffeine, of course, alcohol, and or certain medications, your sleep cycles will be disrupted and you will lose out on these benefits. So like sometimes you can hear people say like, well, I sleep 7 to 8 hours a night, but I'm still just so tired all the time. There's, multiple reasons for that. Maybe they're not optimizing oxygen effectively, for example, their mineral balance is off. But if their circadian rhythm is off and they're not going through these cycles as they should, then yeah, you can wake up still feeling tired and not well rested.
Two quick comments about this figure. It's a really great, I don't know where you found it, Will, but it's a really nice diagram. Um, you need both REM and deep sleep. Really important to be able to flex to do both. And I'm just sitting here thinking about my 20 years as a consultant, where I prided myself on getting by with 4 to 5 hours sleep. And I'm looking at what I lost in those 20 years. It took me a full year of sleeping 8 or 9 hours before my adrenals really reset. So I'm just really reflecting on what I sacrificed during those many years. And it really didn't hit me until I saw this chart. So thank you.
Yeah.
I want to take a nap. Is that okay?
Wait about a half hour.
Okay. All right.
Although I don't know how you could nap in that library with that lighting.
Come on.
Right?
Can you speed it up?
All right, let's go. Copper connection.
That's right.
This is Morley's forte.
That's right.
Take it away, sir.
So the individual I'm researching here, his name was Max Weintraub. He wrote the first textbook of hematology. He was a copper expert. And they did 35 human experiments on the importance of copper in hematology. He's a living legend, but nobody knows who he is now. So again, the challenge that we face within the root cause protocol is we've pretty much accepted the fact that the body runs on copper and everything else is just kind of static. And when you find an article like this, which is what's 2015, 2018, whatever that little number is right now, it's just like, okay, sure, that makes sense. And it turns out that all of the clock genes are copper dependent. And I've known that because I found this article a long time ago. And it's just that the suprachiasmatic nucleus is a very sensitive region that's controlling the wake-sleep cycle. That's a pretty important part of our physiology. And it's really affected by blue light. And this is what Jack Kruse talks about the SCN all the time. What does Jack Kruse never talk about? Copper, ding, ding, ding. And so I think it's really important to realize that this very sensitive brain region needs a battery to work right. And if for a wide variety of reasons we have stressors in our world, that stress is going to affect mineral status. And that's really exactly what happens. And what it's getting down into is some really sophisticated weeds of copper physiology that this transporter, ATP7A, very important for releasing copper-based enzymes into the body, into the brain, then it has a day-night rhythm. And that not many people know that. And this is a particularly sophisticated article that gets into it. And that if you have good copper status, if you have good copper physiology and metabolism, then you're going to have a better control over your sleep pattern. I mean, it makes so much sense. It's just not a lot of authors, not a lot of researchers would make that immediate connection back to copper, which is very, very important. And I think that the bottom quotation is really important as well, saying that they talk about the diurnal changes in copper, that there is this cyclic nature to it. And that's going to affect not just the signaling pathways, it's going to affect the mitochondria, which are a lot in our body, and it's going to also affect the reactive oxygen species, the oxidative stress that we talk about. Another term for it is reactive oxygen species, or they're sometimes called free radicals. You can have as many as you want. They're free, right? No, they're very disruptive. And the part that we, as Will noted, the part that we really focus on is the fact that ceruloplasmin, our sponsor, our hero, is really good at neutralizing that oxidative stress. That's really why it's in our body and throughout our body and throughout our brain. So I think this is a particularly powerful article that really gets to those really critical issues.
Yeah. Makes me think of the double whammy or more of a triple whammy against so many today that, we're dealing with suboptimal levels of bioactive copper in the body. We have all
Right.
these modern day factors that work against it. And then you stack on top of that the fact that so many of us are inside all the time, work inside, We're
right?
not getting that natural light. The light we do receive is artificial. And it's no wonder why so many people have sleep disturbances, mood disorders, issues with their hormones, which we'll talk more about here briefly. But yeah, it's definitely all connected.
And the one further thing I would add to this whole discussion is that when we have acute stress, we're going to lose a lot of magnesium and B vitamins. But when we have chronic stress, and it really becomes habitual, that's going to affect not just adrenaline, but it's going to affect cortisol. And cortisol has a unique ability to increase the production of a very important protein called metallothionein, which binds up metals, but especially binds up copper 1,000-fold stronger than it binds up zinc. So it has a very powerful lock on copper. And that's why people who get into these critical chronic states of stress lose their sleep because the clocks running their physiology are missing the battery. And then they begin to get into this cycle where they're waking up with the moon and going to sleep with the sun. And it happens. It's amazing. And so here we're drilling a little deeper into the role of ATP7A. It's also known as the Menkes gene. You may have heard of that. Its corollary is ATP7B, which is the Wilson's gene. And so you have Menkes is lack of copper, Wilson's is too much. It's not being properly managed and regulated. And so what they're really getting at is um, the importance of this ATP driven pump that makes sure that the copper is there to support the physiology of the body. And so I just wanted to have a couple different research studies to back up our position. And again, the role that copper plays in our energy production through respiration, the creation of dopamine and other complicated chemicals, the connective tissue. I mean, there's so many different dimensions of its activity. But the point that we've highlighted here is that copper has been implicated in neuronal myelination in the oligodendrocytes. It's more than implicated; it is directly in the regulatory space. A great article for those who are interested in that is by Praet, Praet, 2014. It is called the Cuprizone model of MS, multiple sclerosis. But copper is getting involved in the myelination. It's involved in the regulation of the circadian rhythm and in the immune response. And so, as you well know, there's a narrative out there that copper is toxic. It makes no sense. And we don't need to get into that subject right now. But when you begin to understand the focal point of regulatory activity of copper in the body and how it's affected by stress, then you begin to really understand its importance in our physiology.
I know you've mentioned before that the sheer number of enzymes that magnesium powers is probably, you know,
Yeah.
magnesium powers more enzymes than anything else, but you could also make a very strong argument that while copper does not power as many enzymes as magnesium, it powers the most important enzymes.
Well, and the way that happens is that we make our body weight in ATP every day. So we're cycling through ATP to become ADP to come back to ATP. So we're doing that all day long. And magnesium is a part of that ATP structure. That's how an ATP is involved in a lot of enzyme activity. That's how they get away with saying, oh, yeah, well, magnesium is involved in 3,741 or whatever the number is. It's a big number. But what they don't talk about is, well, you can't make ATP without copper. So they're both instrumental in this process.
Yeah. So we're really back to the organizing paradigm of the RCP again,
Mm-hmm.
where rising
Absolutely.
and unchecked oxidative stress causes that mineral loss, which then causes these key enzymes to stop working,
Mm-hmm.
which causes, like Morley was saying, causes these clocks in our body to stop working properly, which then equals symptoms such as being awake all night or, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
following the moon more than the sun, how Morley said. All right, so we'll talk about hormones because those are definitely impacted by our circadian rhythm. Then Morley's going to go a little bit deeper here in a moment regarding a very key enzyme. But just some of the hormones that are impacted by the circadian rhythm include melatonin, of course, also cortisol, growth hormone. We actually receive our biggest surge of growth hormone while we sleep. Some researchers say we receive the biggest surge just during the first few hours of sleep. I've seen some researchers take it a step further and actually say, actually, you receive the biggest surge between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. I'm not sure if that's really like super rock solid, but I think there's definitely something there, which then comes back to the shift work that Morley was speaking about earlier. You know, how people who unfortunately have to do shift work, a lot of the mental and physical effects that they feel from that. Because if you're awake between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., you're missing out on that very key surge of this, what a lot of people refer to as a youthful hormone or hormone of youth. Insulin, leptin, ghrelin, which leptin and ghrelin are actually really powerful hormones that help to regulate your appetite. Also, adiponectin and vasopressin, sex or steroid hormones like testosterone, and more.
And all of these chemicals and hormones that we're identifying here are heavily influenced by iron dysregulation, which is heavily influenced by the bioavailability or the bioactiveness, as well as talking about of the copper. Uh, Particularly the insulin, leptin, ghrelin, and adiponectin and vasopressin. They just iron dysregulation will blow those critical chemicals up.
And so we prefer not to talk about hormones here at the RCP without talking about the PAM enzyme, an enzyme that many have not heard of. So Morley's really uncovered a lot of great information with this enzyme. He's enlightened many in the community around its significance. So Morley, I'm going to let you beat this one up like only you can do.
Yeah, thanks. No, the very early on in my work, I read a book called Mastering Leptin. It's a very, very important book. And it was referencing the hypothalamus. I'd never heard of it, even though I was a biology major in college. Maybe I missed that class. I don't know. But I don't remember them talking about the hypothalamus. And I really locked in on that part of the brain region. And in this book, Mastering Leptin, they talked about the importance of um, hypothalamus regulating 13 regulatory hormones, ACTH being one of them, the precursor to melanin, just a whole wide variety. But 13 was the number. I thought, wow, that's a lot. Well, over the years, I just stayed with it. There was something I was drawn to this particular enzyme, but also just this particular function. Basically, what the body does, the body makes cars. Think of these chemicals as cars, but they're parked in a driveway. Car doesn't do you any good in the driveway. No, you've got to be able to start it, make it active, and get on the highway, get where you need to get. And it's the PAM enzyme, which stands for peptidoglycine alpha amidating monooxygenase. It's 35 letters long. I get $1 every time I say it. It's like I always get excited when I have a chance to talk about it. And I tapped into the research of a husband and wife team that started out at Hopkins, Betty Eiper and Richard Maines. And they were at Hopkins for 20 years. And then they relocated to UConn, University of Connecticut Medical Center, where they continued their research for another 25 years. So 45 years of research. And they never struggled for funding. So that's a staggering track record. And they published hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles. And as I chipped away at it, I discovered that, well, it's not It's not 13. Then it jumped to 42. Then it jumped to 70s, into the 70s. Now it's, this particular reference is to 800. If we really want to use our imagination, it can be as high as 4,700 peptides, but there's a lot of controversy in that. The point being, this enzyme is copper dependent, critically dependent on copper, and we live in a very challenging time with changes in farming, changes in food processing, changes in pharmaceuticals that seem to be removing copper from our environment. And so if this enzyme is off, all of our physiology and all the chemistry that runs our physiology is going to be off because the parked cars are not going to be turned on to get onto the highway. And it's absolutely amazing. And something is central. I'm sure everyone's aware of vitamin D. Well, that's a storage hormone, steroid hormone. It's a storage form. But guess what? You got to have PM to activate it. It's a really big deal. And not a lot of people know about that. And so if we're under stress, if we're under circadian stress, it will throw off our sophisticated chemistry. And so the way we tend to look at it is there, again, as we mentioned earlier, there is this fixation with hormones, but every hormone requires an enzyme. And the enzyme that's consistently needed is this PAM enzyme. And I've talked to many, many practitioners. None of them have ever heard of the PAM enzyme. And so the really scary part is Will came across this reference that there's 139 chemicals that inhibit the PAM enzyme expression. Well, that's really frightening to think about. And that's what they want us to know. It could be 1,000. We don't know. But there's a lot of static out there that can affect our natural ability to keep ourselves in an active state, keep ourselves in a state of homeostasis. And so it really puts this whole concept of bioidentical hormones, hormone replacement therapy. Did we suddenly just fall apart, or are we just missing the activator? Well, we kind of take the position that we're just missing the battery. And it's very important that we get our stress under wraps and that we restore the critical nutrients that we talk about within the RCP, but not the least of which is this PAM enzyme to ensure that our sophisticated chemistry can communicate. Because that's really what hormones do. They are signaling peptides. They're talking to each other all day, all night long. And so we want to optimize that communication wherever possible.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, it's pretty wild the business that hormone replacement therapy is. I mean, you have hormone replacement therapy clinics popping up more and more, and no one's heard of PAM. Just the way so many people have never heard of bioactive copper, or if they have heard of copper, they think it's toxic. So, yeah, that's what sets us apart. Okay, so what can you do? Do your best to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every day, even on the weekends. Um, that can be challenging, but it really is powerful for helping to get you back on track. Create a relaxing bedtime routine. This might include meditation and or breathing exercises. I would also say limiting technology use in the evening, especially gloom and doom news, especially social media. I mean, I think even if you're following things or people on social media that maybe you agree with or maybe that you think is positive or what have you, I personally find social media to just be very stimulating. So that's something to keep in mind, especially with evening usage if you do struggle with sleep issues. Kind of obvious, the caffeine, avoid caffeine in the afternoon, evening. Even if you're someone who feels like, well, caffeine really doesn't affect me that much. I can have some in the late afternoon, evening, and I can still fall asleep okay. even if you feel like you can fall asleep okay, it still will impact your sleep quality. There's a lot of studies out there that shows that it really stays active in the body for a long time. A lot of sources cite between 10 and 13 hours. And so even if you're falling asleep, it can still very likely have a negative impact on those sleep cycles that we briefly touched on and the overall quality of your sleep. Alcohol, you know, if you think alcohol relaxes you and helps you get to sleep, unfortunately, it will have a negative impact on those sleep cycles again. Specifically, it will reduce the amount of time you spend in REM sleep and it will have an overall negative impact. It's also a diuretic, meaning it can contribute to excessive toilet trips during the night, which no one enjoys. Minimize exposure to artificial light in the evening. So, I think everyone here is probably pretty hip to this, pretty up on this. It can be easier said than done. In our modern world, we have all this artificial excess blue light coming from TVs, phones, tablets, computers. Do what you can here to mitigate some of the stress. But really, it's not even just these devices; it's our lighting. Kind of like where Morley's sitting right now. I think a lot of homes these days have similar lighting in the home. So many of us have these really bright, obnoxious LED lights, fluorescent lights that really just kind of crank out this obnoxious. They're going to crank out more blue light. So you can do a little research here. You can check out some websites. I know lightbulbs.com is one. No affiliation, but on sites like this, you can purchase really a wide variety of lights, of light bulbs. You can purchase more like traditional yellow colored bulbs, even orange and red, where you can strategically place these throughout your home and use them more in the evening to avoid more of that just like really intense blue light that can really throw you off. Get regular physical activity during the day, but avoid really intense exercise close to bedtime. This is because really intense exercise can drive up cortisol, can drive up adrenaline, which will make it harder to fall asleep and to stay asleep. But absolutely do your best to, move your body during the day. If you prefer intense exercise or you enjoy getting some of that in, do that a little earlier in the day would be something I would recommend. I've definitely noticed a correlation with how much I move my body during the day and how well I'll typically sleep. You'll also hear a lot of experts recommend that we get about 10,000 steps a day. So just to kind of add on to this, if you're someone who's struggling with sleep, with energy, just really any health challenge, maybe you feel like you should be progressing faster than you are, do a little experiment and track your steps for a week. Track your steps every day for a week and see what you're averaging. I think especially if you work at a desk like so many of us do, you might be surprised, maybe a little depressed as to how many steps you're actually getting in. I think a lot of people I know are probably struggling to hit even 2 to 3,000 steps a day, um, and receive plenty of natural light exposure during the day, especially in the morning. I would say you get some bonus points if you can get outside and get some steps in, get a morning walk in, and kill two birds with one stone there. And this brings us to regular sunlight, which is actually an official RCP start. I think it's an overlooked RCP start. We're light beings, and the sun has a multitude of benefits. Of course, it stimulates the production of vitamin D, aka hormone D. I think everyone here is aware of that, but something that most are not aware of is that sunlight also catalyzes the breakdown of vitamin A into its many retinoids, which includes hormones, nuclear receptors, really, really powerful, which is why we put such an emphasis on vitamin A, aka real retinol, here at the RCP. Sunlight, of course, resets the circadian rhythm for better sleep. And the best time to take advantage of the full spectrum rays on the skin and the eyes is really in the early morning or the late evening, ideally without glasses or sunglasses. Anything you'd like to add here, Morley?
No, I think it's just we're back to the basics, and we recognize the one thing that a lot of people may not know about is that copper has a magnetic attraction to sunlight. Just a very gifted um, practitioner down in Australia brought that to my attention a number of years ago. I've never seen it in the literature spelled out that way, but he's not only a naturopath and chiropractor, but he's an alchemist for 30 years. And he said it's absolutely essential to our ability to gather sunlight. And I think it's really through the folate B vitamin, B9. That particular B vitamin is copper dependent and is critically involved in what we're talking about here about starting the synthesis of vitamin D as well as the breakdown of vitamin A. Um, no, I mean, folate is playing a very key role in that process. So it's just a fun thing to know that how important copper is. And then we think about the copper toned body of our youth, and that was really was right there under our nose, and we didn't realize how important it was.
Yeah, I've been kind of with the issue of sleep. That's something that I've struggled with off and on throughout my life. Sometimes when stress hits, my sleep can really take a bit of a nosedive. But one thing that I have definitely noticed that helps me quite a bit with my sleep quality is doing my best to get outside more or less as early as I can in the morning and just get that natural sunlight on my face. This is nothing to stress about. You don't have to be super regimented about it. We all have different schedules and obligations, so just do the best you can here. Sometimes I get out earlier than other days, but just do your best here because, and even if it's cloudy outside, the amount of light that you'll receive is typically magnitudes greater than what you would receive indoors. And again, this natural light really is just going to help reset your circadian rhythm and get your day going. More specifically, when the sunlight hits our eyes, it actually helps to stimulate the production of some of these neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. And serotonin is actually a precursor to melatonin. So you can set up a healthy nighttime routine first thing in the morning. Basically you're giving your body a boost of serotonin, which in addition to just being something that can help support our mood, it's going to convert into melatonin later on in the evening, assuming again that you actually have good nighttime, we'll call it hygiene, and you're not blasting yourself with excess amounts of blue light in the evening. So what do you do for optimal health? Eliminate the stops. So we have maybe Laura, you can pop a link in the chat to the free RCP handbook. If you haven't downloaded the handbook, please do. It's free. It's going to walk you through the entire protocol. We have a series of stops and a series of starts. Eat a whole food, ancestral based diet. Become aware of and manage your stressors, and seek out and do modalities such as EFT. We often recommend EFT because it's a really easy place to start. That said, to really get the most out of it, we always recommend that you work with a practitioner, which Morley, I know you can elaborate a little bit more on, but if you've tried EFT and it didn't speak to you, that's okay. There's other modalities such as EMDR, emotion code. So just do something to rid yourself as much as possible from past traumas and any stored stress, fear that you still have.
It is so important. I think we've stressed this in many of our webinars, but I just want to amplify what Will is saying. The interconnectedness between emotional health and physical health is profound. I think it's kind of a statement of the obvious, but if you really want to have a breakthrough in your physical health, you're gonna have to deal with your emotional stressors. It's that simple.
Yeah. And as you look at the free handbook, we do have the protocol laid out in a specific order. And that's just what we have found to be the order that most people respond most favorably to. But it's not set in stone. So, you can implement, especially the starts in different orders, I would say, just based on how you react, what you're drawn to. I think there's a lot to be said for listening to your gut, listen to your intuition, and go with what you're drawn to. Here's the handbook we've been speaking about. Again, it's all laid out for you. And if you do feel like you need some more one-on-one support, we do offer the RCP Consultant Directory, which is a directory of individuals who have trained with Morley in the RCP Institute and have graduated. So they are very well equipped to help you on a more personalized path, if that's what you think you could benefit from. If you have questions, like I mentioned at the beginning, when we first kicked the session off, we we do answer questions live twice a month in what's known as the RCP Premium Community. So 2 weeks from today will be our next live Q&A. Morley is there, always joined by another root cause protocol consultant. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's one of our other uh, amazing consultants. We really have an amazing team here, just in general, but an amazing group of consultants that help out. So those are twice a month. We have over 4 years worth of recorded Q&As now that you can go back, you can watch, you can learn from. We also have over 4 years now of webinars, just like this one, that are loaded within the community. So you can just go and watch at your leisure. You don't have to have a password or anything. And they come along with transcripts, PDFs of the slides, and any links that were shared or discussed in the chat. Forgetting anything, Roy?
No, I think we're good.